Alrighty, now on to Thief. Thief by Revan. If the reader has not yet had the pleasure of reading the first volume in these series of the life of Eslav Errol Beggar, he should close his book immediately, for I shan't recap. Link down below in the description for the beggar. I will tell you this much, gentle reader. When we last saw Eslav, he was a boy, an orphan, a failed beggar, running through the wild winter woods of Skyrim. Away from his home of Errolgard, he continued running, stopping here and there for many more years until he was a young man. Eslav discovered that among the ways of getting food, asking for it was the most troublesome. Far easier was finding it in the wilderness or taking it from an unguarded market stall. The only thing worse than begging to get food was begging for the opportunity to work for the money to buy it. That seemed needlessly complicated. No, as far as Eslav was concerned, he was best off being a scavenger, a beggar, and a thief. He committed his first acts of thievery shortly after leaving Errolgard, while in the southern woods of Tamburker, in the rugged land near Mount Jensen, just east of the village of Horobeld. Eslav was starving, having not eaten anything but a rather scrawny raw squirrel in 4 days, and he smelled meats cooking and then found the smoke. A handful of minstrel bards was making camp. He watched them from the bushes as they cooked, and joked and flirted and sang. He could have asked them for food, but so many others had refused him before. Instead, he rushed out, grabbed a piece of meat from the fire, and wincing from the burns, scrambled up the nearest tree to devour it, while the bards stood under him and laughed. "What is your next move, thief?" giggled a fair, red-headed woman who was covered with tattoos. "How do you intend to disappear without us catching and punishing you?" As the hunger subsided, Eslav realized she was right. The only way to get out from the tree without falling in the mist was to take the branch down to where it hung over the creek. It was a drop off a cliff of about 50 feet, and it seemed like the wisest strategy, so Eslav began crawling in that direction. "You do know how to fall, boy," called out a young Khajiit, but a few years older than Eslav, thin but muscular, graceful in his slightest movements. "If you don't, you should just climb down here and take what's coming to you. It's idiotic to break your neck when we just give you some bruises and send you on your way." "Of course I know how to fall," Eslav called back, but he didn't. He just thought the trick of falling was to have nothing underneath you and let nature take its course. But 50 feet up, when you're looking down, is enough to give anyone pause. "I'm sorry to doubt your abilities, Master Thief," said the Khajiit, grinning. "Obviously you know how to fall feet first when your body's straight, but loose to avoid cracking like an egg. It seems you are destined to escape us." Eslav wisely followed the Khajiit's hints, leapt into the river, falling without much grace, but without hurting himself. In the years that followed, he had to make several more drops from even greater heights, usually after a theft, sometimes without water beneath him, and he improved the basic technique. When he arrived in the western town of Jalenhain on the morning of his 21st birthday, it didn't take him long to find out who was the richest person, most deserving of being burgled. Yeah, I didn't say that right. It is what it is. An impregnable palace in a park near the center of town was owned by a mysterious young man named Soybud. Eslav wasted no time in finding the palace and watching it. A fortified palace, he had come to learn, was like a person, with quirks and habits beneath its hard shell. It was not an old place. Evidently, whatever money this Soybud had come into was fairly recent. It was regularly patrolled by guards, implying that the rich man was fearful of being burgled. I think I'm saying it right. With good reason. The most distinctive feature of the palace was its tower, rising 100 feet above the stone walls, doubtless giving the occupants a good defensive view. Eslav guessed that if Soybud was as paranoid as he guessed him to be, the tower would also provide a view of the palace storehouse. The rich man would want to keep an eye on his fortune. That meant that the loot couldn't be directly beneath the tower, but somewhere in the courtyard within the walls. The light in the tower shone all night long, so Eslav boldly decided that the best time to burgle... was by the lights of the day, when Soybud must sleep. That would be the time that the guards would least expect a thief to pounce. And so, when the noon sun was shining over the palace, Eslav quickly scaled the wall near the front gate and waited, hidden in the crenellations. The interior corridor was plain and desolate, with few places to hide. But he saw that there were two wells. One the guards used from time to time to draw up water and shake their thirst. But Eslav noticed that guards would pass by other well, never using it. He waited until the guards were distracted, just for a second, by the arrival of a merchant in a wagon, bearing goods for the palace. While they were searching his wagon, Eslav leapt, elegantly, feet first, from the wall into the well. It was not a particularly soft landing, for as Eslav had guessed, the well was not full of water, but gold. Still, he knew how to roll after a fall, and he didn't hurt himself. In the dark, subterranean storehouse, he stuffed his pockets with gold and was about to go the door which he assumed would lead to the tower, when he noticed a gem the size of an apple, worth more than all the gold that was left. Eslav found room for it down his pants. The door did indeed lead to the tower, and Eslav followed its curving stairwell up, walking quietly but quickly. At the top he found the master of the palace's private quarters, ornate and cold, with an invaluable artwork and decorative swords and shields on the wall. Eslav assumed the snoring lump under the sheets was Soybud, but he didn't investigate too closely. He crept to the windows and looked out. It was going to be a difficult fall for Certus. He needed to jump from the tower, past the walls, and hit the tree on the other side. The tree branches would hurt, but they would break his fall. And there was a pile of hay he had left under the tree to prevent further injury. Eslav was able to leap when the occupant of the room woke up with a start, yelling, "My gem!" Eslav and stared at him for a second, wide-eyed. They looked alike, not surprising since they were brothers. Eslav Arrow's story is continued in the book Warrior. Alrighty, I will see you in the next one.